For decades, Japan has been celebrated as a nation that turns the impossible into reality, the country where bullet trains glide across a landscape with near-perfect precision, where skyscrapers survive earthquakes that would devastate entire cities, where some of the world's most ambitious engineering projects have become symbols of human ingenuity. But hidden in Osaka Bay sit a project so ambitious, so expensive, and so technically complex that many experts still debate whether it was a masterpiece of engineering or a $20 billion mistake. From the sky, it looks extraordinary that a massive international airport built entirely on an artificial island in the middle of the ocean. Millions of passengers pass through it every year. Hundreds of aircraft land and take off from its runways. And at first glance, everything appears perfectly normal. But beneath the terminals, beneath the runways, and beneath millions of tons of concrete, steel, and reclaimed land, something alarming has been happening since the day the airport opened. The entire island is sinking, not by inches, not by a few feet, but by a scale that has shocked engineers around the world that in fact, parts of the airport have already sunk far more than experts originally predicted, and despite decades of repairs, billions of dollars in emergency engineering work, and some of the most sophisticated monitoring systems ever installed, the problem has never truly gone away. The unsettling question is no longer whether the airport is sinking. Everyone agrees that it is. The real question is whether humanity can keep it above water. Because if engineers lose that battle, one of the most expensive infrastructure projects in modern history could eventually be claimed by the sea. And what makes the story even more incredible is that the sinking wasn't an accident. IT was expected from the very beginning. The airport was designed to sink, just not this much, just not this fast. And the reason why it reveals one of the most fascinating engineering stories ever attempted, TO understand how Japan ended up fighting against the ocean beneath a $20 billion airport. We need to go back to a problem that seemed impossible to solve by the 1960s and 1970s. Japan's economy was exploding. Factories were producing goods at unprecedented rates. Exports were flooding international markets. Cities were growing rapidly, and air travel was becoming increasingly important. The Kansai region, home to Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe, had become one of Japan's most important economic centers. Yet there was a major problem. The region's primary airport was located in a densely populated urban area. Residents constantly complained about aircraft noise. Expansion opportunities were limited. Land prices were among the highest in the world. And demand for air travel continued to rise. Government officials knew they needed a new international airport, but finding space for one seemed almost impossible. Building inland would require relocating thousands of people. Entire neighborhoods might need to be demolished. Factories would have to be moved. Businesses would need compensation. Environmental opposition was growing. Political resistance was everywhere. The cost of acquiring enough land appeared. Enormous SO planners began considering an alternative that sounded almost unbelievable. What if they simply built new land in the ocean? At first, the idea seemed outrageous. Constructing an international airport miles offshore would require creating an artificial island larger than hundreds of city blocks. The engineering challenges would be staggering. The cost would be unprecedented. And nobody had ever attempted anything on this scale before. Yet the deeper planners investigated the idea, the more attractive it became. Aircraft noise would be dramatically reduced. Expansion would become easier. The airport could operate 24 hours a day. And most importantly, political opposition would be far lower than displacing entire communities on land. Eventually, the decision was made. Japan would build the world's first major offshore international airport. IT would be called Kansai International Airport, and it would become one of the boldest engineering experiments ever attempted. There was just one problem. The chosen location sat above a seabed composed largely of soft marine clay, and that clay would soon become the project's greatest enemy. To most people, the ocean floor looked solid, but appearances could be deceiving. Beneath Osaka Bay lay layer upon layer of water-saturated clay deposited over thousands of years. This material behaved less like rock and more like a giant sponge. When compressed under enormous weight, it slowly squeezed out water and settled downward. Engineers knew this would happen. The challenge was determining how much, and that is where the story becomes truly incredible. Before a single runway could be built, engineers first had to create an island where none existed. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend. Mountains would literally be carved apart. Millions upon millions of tons of earth and rock would be transported across the region. Entire fleets of ships, barges, and construction equipment would work around the clock. The ocean itself would be reshaped. First, engineers installed an enormous network of vertical sand drains deep into the seabed. More than 2 million of them, each designed to accelerate the removal of water trapped inside the clay below. Think of it like squeezing a soaked sponge. The faster the water escapes, the faster the ground stabilizes. Without this process, the island would remain too soft to support an airport. Then came the land itself. An unimaginable quantity of rock and soil was dumped into the bay day after day, month after month, year after year. The artificial island slowly emerged from the sea, eventually covering hundreds of hectares of massive seawall surrounded the perimeter. Gigantic steel structures were sunk into position. Thousands of specially designed wave-breaking concrete blocks were installed to protect the future airport from storms and erosion. The project became one of the largest civil engineering operations on Earth. And yet, while the island was rising above the water, another process had already begun beneath it. The seabed was sinking at first. Engineers remained confident. Their model predicted settlement. They expected the island to gradually sink over several decades before stabilizing. The airport would lose elevation, but not enough to threaten operations. Everything appeared manageable. But what happened next surprised everyone. As construction continued through the late 1980s and early 1990s, monitoring instruments began revealing something troubling. The ground wasn't settling according to expectations. That IT was sinking faster and deeper. The numbers kept climbing. The projections kept changing, and some engineers quietly began to wonder whether the foundation beneath the airport was behaving very differently than originally assumed. The warning signs were there. But by then, there was no turning back. Billions had already been invested. The terminal was under construction. The runways were taking shape. And the world was watching. Japan had committed itself to one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history. The only question now was whether the ground beneath it would cooperate. The IT wouldn't.